Calling to order the recessed Oshkosh Council meeting of April 9, 2019 to order. Will the city clerk please take the roll?
Mugrower,
Here.
Krause,
Here.
Peck,
Here.
Herman,
Here.
Alison Osby. Here. Palmieri.
Here.
Cummings.
Here.
Present 7.
First on the agenda is an opportunity for citizens to make comments to the council. Has anyone registered?
No one is registered.
We'll move to other business. I believe we have some plaques to present. Councilman Herman.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make a comment. I know that you and Councilmember Peck comments at the last council meeting. I just want to, as having served with both of you for 8+ years, 9 I think total, I appreciate working with you, the mayor. You've had great vision. You've worked hard to make sure that we're a player, not only here in Oshkosh, but in the Fox River Valley, around the state of Wisconsin. We're recognized at the League of Municipalities in your work that you've done with the league and some of the other committees that you served on. You're one of the first mayors to go outside the city a little more than just regional, and I think it's very important as being one of the largest cities for the state of Wisconsin. So I appreciate that opportunity to work with you. You and I got on council at the same time, and we moved a lot of tough issues forward, from the hotel to the Riverwalk, to Oshkosh Corp, to Menominee Nation Arena, and we still have many things to work on, so appreciate that. And to Councilmember Peck, you and I have gotten along to agree to disagree at times, but appreciate your insight and your work ethic. You worked very hard to on the Long Range Finance Committee to bring forward a redo of our CIP and even how we do our TIFs. And I think that work took a lot of time and effort, and I appreciate your commitment and all the commitment that you've made to the citizens of Oshkosh. So as the senior council member, going into my 10th year on council, I just want to thank you guys for your hard work and dedication to the city of Oshkosh and the citizens that you represent. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Alison Osby.
Well, Councilor Herman beat me to the punch, but I also would like to thank both Steve and Mayor Cummings and Council Member Peck. When I was elected, nobody knew, I don't think, who I was. It kind of came out of nowhere. And Steve, I will always appreciate that you were the very first phone call I ever received, congratulating me, welcoming me, and asking if there was anything that you could do to help, especially going into those first few months. And so I certainly appreciate that. I also mirror what Councilor Member Herman said. Certainly the approach to getting outside of the area, making Oshkosh known a little more through the state, certainly have appreciated, although at times we've had some tough issues and it's not always been a smooth road, that there was certainly, I believe, mutual respect. Councilmember Peck, our first meeting, you were more than happy to tell me that you were the most qualified for the position, and I appreciated the boldness and the honesty. And again, we've also had at times our bumps and struggles a little bit, but at the end of the day, to be able to have the opportunity to work with the both of you along with past council members really truly has been an honor, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have some plaques to present now, and before we end the day. So, you wanted us out, Mr. Peck? This is an appreciation of your 8 years on the council. There's not much I can add to what Council Members Herman and Alison Osby said. We've accomplished a lot in almost a decade, and I don't think we'll ever see a decade like this again. We have moved the city so forward so rapidly. And in the process, we've not always agreed, but we become, I think, very, very good friends in the last decade. So, Tom, thank you.
Mayor Cummings, thank you for your service and your passion for this city.
I have learned a number of lessons from you, and I appreciate all that you've done as both a council member and a mayor in bringing forth unity in our community events as well as amongst the council. So thank you so much for your service.
Councilmember Peck.
Thank you. Just as I said the other night, I'm truly honored and privileged to have served the citizens of Oshkosh. The one thing I want to leave everyone with is thoughts become words, words become actions, actions become character. Character is what matters. It's one thing to talk the talk, it's another to walk the walk. If you say you're going to do something, if you tell people you're going to do something, you need to have the fortitude to follow it through and actually put your words into actions. If you don't put them into actions, those words are not worth the breath that was used to speak them, nor the ink that was used to write them. Words mean things. Actions prove words. Again, it's been an honor and a privilege to serve the citizens of Oshkosh for 8 years. With the 12 years on county board, it's a nice round 20 years of public service. I thank everyone.
And I too want to add my thank you to the citizens of Oshkosh for putting their faith in me to lead the city for the last, almost a decade. I didn't know Steve Herman 10 years ago. We become very, I guess I would say, close friends. We don't always agree, but we put the interest of the city and the citizens of Oshkosh before our own personal preferences. I didn't know Tom 8 years ago. I didn't know Deb 8 years ago. Again, we become, I think, very close friends. While we don't always agree, we have the city and the citizens of Oshkosh in our best interest. It's been a phenomenal decade. It's having lived here all my life, it is a changed city. It is just, I've referred to it as kind of a boom town, but it's a totally different place. And so I thank the citizens again for their support. And with that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn sine die.
So moved.
Second.
Would you please take the roll?
Mugrower,
Aye.
Rousey,
Aye.
Peck,
Aye.
Herman,
Aye.
Alison Osby,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
carried 7.
Adjourn.
Along with the ordinances of the city of Oshkosh, and faithfully discharge the duties of Oshkosh mayor to the best of your ability. Raise your right hand, please. Do Do you swear or affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, along with the ordinances of the City of Oshkosh, and will faithfully discharge the duties of council member to the best of your ability?
You should trifecta. Don't touch your fingers.
We'll now call to order the April 16th, 2019 Common Council. Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Alison Osby.
Here?
Herman.
Here.
Krause.
Here.
Mugrower.
Here.
Peschel.
Here.
Palmieri.
Here.
Present 6. For the record, if I could just make note that the mayor and the 3 council members were sworn in between the recess meeting and the organizational meeting.
Thank you. So we'll now proceed to nomination for deputy mayor. I will call for nominations 3 times, and then we'll take a motion to close nominations. So first call for nominations for deputy mayor.
Matt Mugar.
Jake Krause.
Second call for nominations for deputy mayor. And third and final call for nominations for deputy mayor. I'll entertain a motion to close nominations. Need a
So
first and a
moved.
second.
Second.
So we have nominations for Matt Mugrower and Jake Krause. Any discussion?
You have the motion to close nominations.
We just had the motion, second.
She did that.
Take the roll.
Bob.
Take the roll.
Excuse me.
That's okay. Allison Osby.
Aye.
Herman.
Aye.
Krause.
Aye.
Mugrower.
Aye.
Peschel.
Aye.
Palmieri.
Aye.
Carried 6.
Now we'll have discussion for the nominations on Jake Krause and Matt Mugrower.
I'll go. So I nominated Jake Krause, mainly because I believe he's a person that wants to serve in this position as deputy mayor. He's expressed it to me. And I believe that anyone that sits on the council that wants to serve in that capacity should have the opportunity to let their peers, let them know whether he would be good enough to serve in that position. So I believe that anyone that sits on this dais is probably equally prepared to serve in that capacity, but it has been expressed to me that Jake would like to serve in that capacity.
Councilmember Osby?
Thank you, Mayor. I would concur with Councilmember Peschel, and I think both Mr. Krause and Mr. Mugrauer, I think, obviously have worked with both of them for 2 years and 1 year. Both are very, very capable of doing the job. So that'll be a very tough decision.
Councilmember Herman.
Thank you, Mayor. I nominate Mr. Mugrauer. He approached me about the position. Having served 3 times in that position, he knew that I had some background in serving that position. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about the deputy mayor's role and what it's all about. And it's more than putting us in closed session. And it's actually more than getting the council together to evaluate the city manager and to determine whether we continue with Mr. Roloff as our city manager and his salary and compensation package. It's a lot more than that. It's going to events, it's going to activities, it's going to fill in for the mayor when the mayor can't make an event or some function like that. You're a leader out in the community. You need to be seen out in the community. You need to be part of leadership to the council. So I think it's very, very important. And in the year that Mr. Mugrauer has been on council, seen him at many events, many activities. He's engaged. He goes to a lot of the open houses when we have discussions out in the community. He attends, and he's taken an effort to contact council members at times when he's had questions or concerns, and even he's made the effort when he's made some mistakes to admit that he's made mistakes, and that takes a lot. I've made plenty up here, and it takes a lot to admit that you might speak out of turn a little bit, or you're misunderstood at times, and you need to further express yourself. Those of you that are in the audience probably know I'm very big about we as a city need to tell our story, tell our citizens what we're doing out in the community and how important it is what we're doing with their tax dollars. So the mayor is more than, the deputy mayor is just more than a title. Yes, it's appointed from amongst its council members, but it's also a leadership role, and I think Mr. Mugrauer has shown in his year that he can handle that position and handle it very well, and that's why I nominated him for deputy mayor. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Oh, Deb?
I think the other point to make, the public may or may not be aware is that, and this was a question that I posed to both Mr. Mugrauer and Mr. Krause, is it is extra responsibility. And just as a reminder to the public, there is no extra pay for it. So it is genuinely something in which somebody is stepping forward, asking to take additional responsibilities with really not netting any monetary value from it. So I did want to make sure that that was out there as well.
If there's no further discussion, we'll proceed to the election of deputy mayor. When the roll is called, please indicate which council member you'll be supporting for deputy mayor. Clerk, could you take the roll, please? Thank you.
Alison Osby,
Mr. Mugrauer.
Herman,
Mr. Mugrauer.
Krause,
Krause.
Mugrauer,
Mugrauer.
Peschel,
Krause.
Palmieri,
Krause.
it's a tie, it loses.
So we have an opportunity now to either have further discussion on this, or if we need to, we may entertain a motion to lay over until May 14th. If you'd like to have further discussion, council, on this. Councilmember Mugrauer?
Can I get just a quick clarification from Pam or from Lynn? Are we able to renominate someone else and go back and reopen nominations as part of the process?
Yes.
If there's no other discussion, I wouldn't mind, I would move to reopen nominations.
I'll second.
So, excuse me?
Vote
Oh,
on
yep.
the Motion to reopen.
Motion to reopen is, we're now going to call the roll on that?
Mhm.
Yep.
Yes.
Alison Osby,
Aye.
Herman,
Aye.
Krause,
Aye.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Peschel,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 6.
So I will call for further nominations. Councilmember Mugrower.
I'd like to nominate Councilmember Steve Herman.
I'll call for nominations a second time.
Just to muddy the waters a little bit, I will call for Jake's nomination again, Mr. Krause.
And a third and final call for nominations.
And I am allowed to nominate more than one person, correct?
I don't see a problem with that.
On the third calling, he is, isn't he?
I've never heard that.
It's the third and
Up
final
to the
call.
council if they
Okay.
allow you to.
Council entertain.
Council's entertaining? Yes? All right. I would also suggest Mr. Mugrower again as well.
Okay, then we will proceed to
Motion to close.
take a motion to close.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Nominations are closed. Again, if the clerk will take the roll, indicate your preference.
We're closing nominations again.
So we have to
close.
vote to close.
Right.
Okay, Alison Osby,
Aye.
Herman,
Aye.
Krause,
Aye.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Peschel,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 6.
So nominations are closed. We'll now take the roll for the second time for council members to indicate their preference. And clerk, if you could please take the roll.
Madam Mayor, if I was let up, sorry.
Call the roll. There's no discussion, is there?
Is there a discussion?
Normally, we go from closing nominations to allowing for
There-
discussion
Typically,
first.
there's discussion.
Further
Did
discussion,
you make
Councilmember
discussion?
Mugrower is first on the list. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to thank you, Councilmember Herman, for nominating me. I very much appreciate that, and the kind words of my fellow council members. And while I do think I would serve in the role very well, I do see it as a important role in the community, and that's the reason I then followed up and nominated my fellow council member, Steve Herman, who I think would do an excellent job. He's done it before, and I would encourage anyone who supported my nomination to do so for Councilmember Herman. I think he would do fantastic in the role.
Councilmember Osby.
So, Mr. Mugrower, do you want to remain on the list, or are you withdrawing your name?
I'm going to withdraw my name if, seeing as a tie and seeing as I didn't receive enough votes from my fellow council members to move forward, I would then suggest that Councilmember Herman be the one who be our next deputy mayor.
Do we need a motion and a second on that then? For him to
He's
withdraw?
just withdrawn his.
All right. Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Okay, so when I call your name, you're going to indicate between Councilmember Herman or Councilmember Krause.
Okay.
Alison Osby,
Herman?
Herman,
Herman.
Krause,
Krause.
Mugrower,
Herman?
Peschel,
Krause.
Palmieri,
Herman.
carried 4-2. Mr. Herman is our deputy mayor.
Not bad on that. Thank you.
So next we'll do council seating assignments, and this goes by seniority. Deputy Mayor Herman.
I'm right where I have to be.
Yep. You're first on the list also.
Thank you.
Councilmember Osby?
Thank you, Mayor. I enjoy the seat that I'm in. I will remain here.
Very good. Councilmember Crossley?
I'll be staying right here.
And Councilmember Mugrower?
I will stay right here.
All right, and then Councilmember Peschel.
I guess it's decided.
All right. Well, you have the option of
Yes.
the others.
I'll-
Okay.
I
There's
like
one
that.
left.
Bob? Bob, it's warm yet.
Okay, so on to some procedural matters. The orientation of city departments for council members. We have that option. Councilmember Peschel, having served previously, may be acquainted with that, but perhaps, Mr. Olaf, you'd like to share some invitations there.
Sure. Well, first off, the city clerk and city attorney typically do a go-over of more legal procedural things, open meetings law, conflict of interest, things like that. Strongly encourage you to do that, even if it's just a refresher course for some of the council members. Then also, Emily Springstrow with Oshkosh Media coordinates any field visits that you might want to make with any of the departments. And I would open that up to any and all council members. If you missed one last year and you maybe want to catch up on that or need a refresher on something, absolutely. So please contact Diane in my office, and she'll arrange with Emily those things. But Emily will take care of that thing for you. And then meanwhile, we are working on an orientation booklet that covers a variety of things. And certainly, and we're going to be working with Human Resources on that, just to make sure we catch up on other things. And then, of course, Mr. Peschel and I have already met. If you want to touch base on current issues, certainly happy to do that, where we can do it on a one-on-one basis, and you can specialize your questions and thoughts on things that you would like to talk to me about. Happy to do that. And certainly reach out to department heads if you're looking for general information. I think it's very important for you to have contact, and I'm very comfortable with you talking to department heads about general information. You're the first of 7 citizens, and we want to make sure that you have as much information as possible. Want to encourage you to reach out to department heads as well.
Thank you.
That's it.
And City Manager Roloff and I had a little bit of a discussion about orientation and kind of onboarding for new council members. You have the advantage of having some familiarity, but for any future incoming council members, also wanting to be welcoming and make that learning curve as seamless as possible. So we look forward to that. So next is discussion of council rules. I believe all council members have received a copy of the council rules.
Right.
And this would be the time where we would discuss any concerns with council rules, any wishes to make changes, or, so we'll have that discussion now. Did it-
I don't-
Councilmember Peschel,
No,
anything?
I don't have anything.
All right. Clerk, would you please take the roll on that?
We need a motion and a second.
I'm sorry, motion and a second.
So moved.
Second?
Now I need discussion. Deputy Mayor Herman?
Thank you, Mayor. Just one comment, really, just a reminder to all council members and even to the community that this council has approved the civility pledge, and we continue to follow that civility pledge. I think it's very important because there's a lot of discourse on the national level and even on the state level at times, that we need to make sure that we respect all our citizens, respect all our differences, make sure that we as council listen to our citizens, make sure that we listen to our constituents, and make sure that we respect each other as council members. Sometimes we get emotional on topics and get emotional from even hearing from our citizens. And so it's important that we lead by example. So I just want to remind everybody that we have approved the civility pledge. We continue to support that, and that I think it's important that we talk in one voice at times as civil to issues that we're facing in the city, because they are very difficult at times,
They're very emotional at times, and they have a big impact on not only the city, but its citizens. So I just want to remind everybody of that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilmember Peschel.
Sure. I guess my thoughts kind of revolve around the appointment that we'll be making in the next 30 days to the council, and wondering if this is something that we can continue to operate in the way that it's been approved for the last year, but then also provide the opportunity for that new appointed council member to kind of weigh in their thoughts on the rules of order. So in my mind, I guess I'd be putting out a motion to table this until our next meeting the meeting where we appoint the next council member. Just a discussion, it's not a motion yet.
Attorney Lawrence.
Oh. You can adopt the rules, you can make changes at any time, yeah. So we would just ask you to adopt them so we have the rules in place. If when the person comes on, you want to revisit them, we can certainly do that as well.
Councilmember Peschel.
Sure, so I guess if we don't make a change today, we're still operating under these rules, correct?
Correct.
So then we can just say that we're gonna wait to discuss these rules again. Are we?
Well, we would have you adopt them today so that you're operating under these rules. And then if later you want to make a change, there's nothing that says they can only come up once a year. So you could bring them back and we can revisit them at any time.
I think we're thinking the same thing. I'm just gonna go along with it, because what I just heard you say is that we don't have to make a change right now. We don't even have to adopt them because we're gonna practice them no matter what.
No, I'm saying adopt them today.
Okay. All right. No big deal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I was just going to respond to Mr. Peschel's comments. Longstanding has been that the council approves the rules at its organizational meeting, and you know from previous time, Mr. Peschel, that council can waive rules based on, and if we want to make changes, once the 7th council member comes on board, I think that's a great opportunity. But procedural-wise, I think it's appropriate that we approve the rules today, and then they're in place, and if we think we need to make some changes, we can do that.
All right.
Vote on the rules, though?
So if we can take the roll now on the council rules as stated.
Alison Osby,
Aye.
Herman,
Aye.
Krause,
Aye.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Peschel,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 6.
Next is discussion of agenda format. And this would be the point in time where we would discuss any potential changes to the format of our agenda. Currently, we do allow two opportunities to citizens to speak, one in the beginning and one towards the end. Do council members have any other further discussion on the agenda format? Councilmember Osby.
I just would like to state that I do believe we should keep both opportunity at the beginning and the opportunity at the end. But we've seen a number of times where it's very convenient for somebody to come earlier, but we've also seen situations where they may have had another commitment and they still can get in before the end of the meeting. So I think it's important. I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but I do think that is something that we should keep a part of our agenda process.
Councilmember Mugrower.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, I happen to agree with Councilmember Osby. The format, I think, works well. Having two chances for the public to speak at the front end and the back end of it is a good thing. The registering out in the hallway or prior to coming here also seems to be working pretty well, and allows us to get the right information and be able to contact people afterwards correctly and easily, which I've done a couple times. So I think the format itself is pretty good as is and doesn't need too many changes.
I'd just like to put this out for council discussion, and that is, there have been times in the past where we've had some items towards the end of the agenda, maybe under city managers or council member statements that require some follow-up. Is it of interest to council to look at perhaps carrying over some of those status updates for items? It seems that sometimes we may need to just clarify when we're expecting to hear back on something. I'd just like to know your thoughts. Deputy Mayor Herman.
Thank you, Mayor. Are you thinking more like a line item on the agenda where we would say, if it's something, like we talked about, we want to have it back on the agenda 2 weeks from this council meeting or this next council meeting, that there's a spot that it's actually kind of saved on the agenda so that that date is always out there so that the citizens want to come back and speak on that or something like that? Is that what you're
That was my
coming from?
thought, and we talked briefly about
Yeah.
that as
I know we've struggled with timelines at times with council, and that might be a good point to have a spot where we can specifically, we now know there's a placeholder on the agenda to, say that, let's just use we're working on this assessment for street project. Maybe we put a timeline that, it has to come back on the agenda 3 council meetings from tonight or something like that, so that gives you direction, city manager off to your staff, that we got to work on this because council wants this to come back. And I guess a good example, and I don't want to belabor the point because I know how busy the city attorney's office is, but we were about 3 months into getting the vaping ordinance, and maybe if we could have had it on that it was coming back to council by a certain time for either further discussion because we couldn't get it done in one way or a different way, but that at least, because I got several emails from citizens kind of what's up with it because they haven't heard any more on it. So might be a good point that the mayor has, that we put a spot on there for, follow-up on a council discussion, or even if we table a resolution that it's specifically, or an ordinance, that we specifically have it on the agenda that it'll be back in front of council on a certain date. Might help us with timelines. Your feelings? I
I'm
guess?
going to come back to city manager. We have 2 other council members who'd like to speak first. Councilmember Krause?
I've always been under the impression if we have an item at the end of the agenda, it's up to us to ask for it to be brought back on a future agenda, and we can discuss a date at that time. So I don't really understand what we need to add or change when we are able to do that already.
Councilmember Osby?
Thank you, Mayor. So when I think of the agenda, and we don't have, I don't have a past one, so where typically, like currently, say, city manager roll-off updates us on, say, Oshkosh Corp., or something that tends to be a longer project. So what you're suggesting is something outside of that, and that's more short-term?
Perhaps, I think, for example, we've had a few things such as, our transportation utility fee, or maybe it's key performance measurements or things like that, maybe we've had workshops on or other council discussion, and then there's been direction. So it's just perhaps another line item under council or city manager direction, and then those other items that carry over that are longer term. So kind of bifurcated, if you will. Well, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. It's probably not a terrible idea because, typically as we move through, you hate to have things fall between the cracks. And, I know when we were talking about just kind of goals this last year and reevaluating some things, and, whether it would be the CIP, the cap that we put on or other things like that, maybe it's not bad to kind of come back around, and we've talked about, like, not only, sometimes it's more for council's benefit to keep ourselves on a timeline, more so than staff. So I don't think it's a terrible idea, Ms. Palmieri.
City Manager Ola?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is not the first time this has been discussed, so I think there's some value to it. I think it helps me with being accountable to council as well as the staff being accountable. Councilmember Mugarauer at the very last meeting asked for a status update on the special assessment transportation fee. So what I've seen and what I've done in the past is status of outstanding issues, and we can put that on there. If any council member says, I'd like to add that, we just put it on. Sort of like consent, you put it on unless you want to pull it off. I think there's value to it. We can put a date of reporting back, and then everybody knows, oh, the next meeting, the city manager is going to report on that. I'm very familiar and very comfortable with that, and I think there may be some value, and we'll learn together on how we can improve on that. The Oshkosh Corp one that Councilmember Alison Osby mentioned, that was the last time I think this was discussed, and the council said, can you just keep that on there? I would see that as being one of the first of several items that you would see on that report. So happy to do that, and happy to do that.
I don't believe that requires any kind of vote.
Correct.
So, if there's no further discussion, Councilmember Peschel.
Thanks. I was waiting for you guys to finish discussing that one. I guess I'd want to see if the council would entertain a new addition to the agenda under something called like committee reports. So, you know, where all of us are going to be appointed to certain committees and boards or commissions on stuff, and I think it could be a good practice for us to report back what we're experiencing on those boards and commissions. And I'm not thinking, you know, that it has to be a meeting. It's just an opportunity for that council member to give a report. So.
Councilmember Osby?
I'm not opposed to it, but I think because not all committees meet every month, because a lot of it determines whether there's any actionable items to discuss or to vote on, I don't see an issue with it once a quarter, but I don't think every meeting, I don't think is appropriate. We have meeting minutes that certainly we should be responsible for reviewing. That's just my personal opinion, is I think perhaps quarterly.
Okay.
Councilmember Peschel.
Sure, I guess I hadn't really thought of the time frame related to that. I think my real thinking behind it is that sometimes residents, citizens, just find out about this stuff when it's up for vote. Or, and it's not that they can't go out there and find some of this information. It's just that we are taking our role just a little bit further and discussing what we're seeing on that committee level. I think, I'm not sure that I think quarterly. I think I might be more comfortable with like a monthly thing, but not every meeting. Partially because there are lots of boards and commissions that do meet monthly. And some of that information might be too late by the time, if we were to wait for a quarterly. So, but ultimately, it's to create a vehicle so that the public knows a little bit more of what's going on with those boards and commissions.
Deputy Mayor Herman.
Thank you. I agree with Councilmember Alison Osby. I think it's good. I think a lot of the committees are mostly the ones that at least I've been on are focusing on moving, like the traffic review moves forward with an ordinance change or anything like that. So, you got it's two readings before it gets approved. Once in a while, we approve it on first reading. But it's not a bad idea to maybe tell our story, get more information out to our citizens, what we're working on. I don't know if that creates a little bit of a problem for staff that may not have really something on the agenda, and all of a sudden they think they need to be here because their member is speaking on it, and then they'd like to maybe weigh in on what council is talking about. So I don't know how that would affect our staff.
City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What I've seen before is when this is, I've seen it with council liaison reports. I'm splitting the hairs a little bit with what Councilmember Peschel's talking about. There's always a concern of having an open-ended committee reports. It could deflect into other discussions. There may be kind of a middle ground. You can put it on the agenda, and if a council member wishes to provide an update, I just came from the Transit Committee meeting and want to update people on, whatever, then council members, now I would ask you to let me know by Thursday morning before a council meeting, but I'd like to give a report on transit, or I'd like to give a report on housing authority, which is one of those that largely doesn't get discussed. So there's a lot of value to that, and Mayor and I have talked about how the committee chairs reports, there's discussions about them as well, bringing some reports back. Not every committee has a council liaison, but if a council member would like to have a committee report, I would just suggest be specific from an open meeting standpoint, then everybody knows. So then the question about would staff be aware of it? We would be, because a council member would say, I want to talk about transit. Well, then I go to Mr. Collins. I want to talk about police, speeding on a street. We can do that. Because a lot of work in progress with committees is what you don't necessarily get it. You get it when they bring you a recommendation, but it's kind of a status report. So you've asked me to provide it. There may be value to do it to keep council in the loop, so it's not kind of thrust upon you for, up or down on an ordinance or a resolution. So I share that with you, and whatever you choose to do, I certainly appreciate it.
Councilmember Murauer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Personally, I like the current process that we use under council member statements. If we have an update from a board or commission that we're serving on, I know regular now Mayor Palmieri has reported on rental housing, on long-range finance. That's the appropriate spot to put that, and you can easily add that on any point before that agenda comes out on Friday. So we're not stifling anybody's ability to provide that report. In fact, if you'd like to, your name can be on every Tuesday night that we meet here with a board or commission update, depending on what commission you're on. So I like the current process that we currently use.
And I'd just like to say that I like the compromise of the quarterly, because we do have a number of boards and commissions, as well as the mayor meeting with the chairs of those quarterly. So in between that, if there is something time sensitive, any council member could go put that on. So I think that if we were going to do that, and I think there would have value for sure in having that update, but I'm leaning towards the quarterly. Deputy Mayor Herman.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess this is kind of a question for the city attorney. A little concern I have is we sometimes have gotten into this where we're actually almost like voting on something in a discussion item. So somebody gives a report, and another council member brings a question up. Now we're getting into this Q&A type situation. Are we kind of violating, even though it's kind of on the agenda, but is it? I agree with what Councilmember Murauer said, is more of it's on the agenda, that specific item. Not all of a sudden, let's just say I'm on the Parks Board and I give a Parks report and somebody says, well, what about this or what about that? Now we're getting into this kind of open discussion, and it's not really what that's supposed to be. So we have to police ourselves on this. And that's a concern I have for you and
Yep.
even
And that's
staff.
why we're suggesting be specific with a
topic.
item for the notice, so that the city clerk can put it on the agenda, and anybody, we know as staff and anybody in the public knows, these are, it's not just Parks Board report, these are the items that we're going to provide an update on.
I agree with Mr. Murauer. I think we have the opportunity already to do that under council discussion, direction, city manager, that if there is something that one of us wants to bring up from a board committee meeting wise, we can do that.
Councilmember Peschel, you had another comment, and
Sure.
my
Well,
technology is a little behind the curve here.
That's okay. Thank you. Mr. Roloff, you kind of actually hit it on the head a little bit, is that we would let you know that there's a committee report that we'd like to do. I don't necessarily know that the quarterly thing is really that relevant. All I'm really asking is to put on the agenda another spot where it says committee reports. And if a council person wants to make a committee report on whatever committee that they serve on, they can let the mayor or the city manager know by the time allotted that says, I plan to make a committee report on the Transit Advisory Board or the Traffic and Parking Review Board. I'm not asking for this to become a lot of extra work. It's really at your pleasure to be able to provide that information. I'm not saying that you have to do it. I'm just saying is that some of us might enjoy that ability to do that. And just having that there allows us to have a little bit more communication, again, of what those committees and boards are doing.
Council Krause?
I can see everybody's point to a degree. If we didn't have council member statements or announcements, I could see Mr. Peschel's idea being a good one, but we can, like Mr. Murrow said, we can get our story or our ideas or pass along a message every 2 weeks if we want.
And Councilmember Osby?
Thank you. I was actually going to say what Mr. Krause just said. I was confused at first. I thought Mr. Peschel was saying that this was mandatory, but you said it's not. So then I would assume it'd be as we've always done, is that if there's something that we feel that we need to give our colleagues a heads up on, it does go underneath the council discussion, in which at that point, we do have to be very, very careful in that we stick to a statement and not a discussion among council members, given it's not noticed and not on the agenda.
All right, one last
One more time.
comment.
And I'm not going to sell you
Councilmember
guys on
Peschel.
it. So I just wanted to give an example of how I've seen this worked elsewhere. And so a lot of times, and this is where I think you guys think it's kind of a sticky, dicey situation because we start talking and discussing things. Basically, the comments are reported back off of existing open records. And so it's not necessarily your version of the story. It's you're reporting what took place in the public sphere, just one step further than just having the minutes available on the website so that people can go to read it. And so you're really telling the story of the people that you're working with on that committee. And it's just getting that out more. I'm sorry that I led you to believe that it was going to be our stories as individual persons, but it's really that collective story of those community members that you're serving with. And that's where I see having a committee reports agenda item that allows you to be able to say, I'm going to report back on what took place on the Parks Board last month or last week. It's another way of dispersing what we're doing in the city, what the city is doing. So I'll stand down if you guys don't want to do it. I'm perfectly good with that. But I just wanted to be clear that I'm not asking you to be liberal in the story, but to actually take the story as it's being documented at the committees and communicating it to the community.
Well, there's no, Deputy Mayor Herman.
No, I already spoke.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So it sounds as if, City Manager, it sounds as if no change at this time with regard to committee reports. All right, other business discussion regarding council preference of board and commission liaison assignments. I just wanted to ask council members if they would email me their preferences by this Friday, like noon, if that would work for you, so that we can move on with that piece. Is there any further discussion on council preferences on boards and commission liaison assignments? Okay, seeing none, then we will go on to discussion regarding process of reappointment of citizens to boards and commissions. Would just ask that any appointed citizens on boards and commissions indicate via email their desire to be reappointed. Just wanting to clarify, it is not automatic. And so if you do wish to continue to serve where you are, to please indicate that via email, and that can come directly to me or to City Manager. Would you like to speak?
No.
Okay.
I have a comment on that.
Deputy Mayor.
I have a question. Are you saying those that their term limit isn't up, because they have term limits, right? 2 years on the boards, 3 years?
They're different
Depends on which
limits.
board, but.
Right,
yeah.
so are you saying whether
Those
their
who
term
are-
is up or not, they need to contact you, or if their term is up
If
and
their
they need
term
to be
is expired.
reappointed?
Yes.
I just want clarification, because it made it sound like you were
My apologies.
everybody that was on a board and commission need to contact you. And you're going to get,
No.
you're going to get a lot of emails.
My
But
apologies.
It's those that are up for appointment.
Correct.
Okay.
Those whose terms are expiring. So,
Very
for
good.
example, right now,
Just
the
want
end of
clarification.
May, there are a number of expirations that are coming up the end of May. Some may be on a 2-year cycle, some may be on a
Right.
3-year cycle, just to indicate a preference if they would wish to continue to serve.
Madam Mayor?
City Manager.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification. In terms of what I would ask my staff to do is to notify all boards and commissioners whose terms are expiring, that their term is, just reminding them that their term is expiring, if they wish to be reappointed, to contact either the mayor or my office directly, so that we know, Ms. Smith, yes, she's interested in getting reappointed, and something like that. Okay, great. Thank you.
And that, if we don't have any further discussion, that kind of leads into kind of an explanation of the new application for boards and commissions for new citizen appointments. That is available on the website. It is either a printable online application or a fill-in online application. If you do print that, it goes through city manager's office to me, and I would humbly ask you to consider serving on those boards and commissions that are of interest. Clerk, I'm sorry, Pam, did you need something? I thought you were raising your.
No.
All right. Is there any discussion on that new application process? Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Come on, you big gamble. Give her.